Ukraine is a huge mess that Trump has inherited. That's not an excuse because now he has to go in, take responsibility for America, take responsibility as a country that operates in the world and do what's right. J.D. Vance is under attack, being blamed by the left for what he said to Zelensky, which I think he was totally justified. He's going to explain here. Welcome to the Doug Tenable channel. Let's watch Vice President, the Great, and your next president, J.D. Vance.
Here's the thing, when you would talk to the Biden administration officials in private, it's another example of a terrible situation the Biden admin left the Trump administration. When you ask them what's the plan, okay, we're going to spend tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars in Ukraine. What is your plan? And they would honestly tell you, well, we're just going to send them weapons for as long as we can and hope eventually they can turn the tide. Hope is not a strategy. Throwing money and ammunition at a terrible conflict, that is not a strategy.
That's also how you make yourself feel good without actually doing anything. And Democrats act like they've always known that Russia was the big threat aggressor. But here's Mitt Romney after he said the greatest threat to America is Russia. Here's Barack Obama mocking him, saying, the 80s want their foreign policy back.
Governor Romney, I'm glad that you recognize that al-Qaeda is a threat, because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia, not al-Qaeda. You said Russia. And the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back because, the Cold War has been over for 20 years.
Hey, the Cold War, it's been over for 20 years. Let's just send that message right back to all of the warmongers and people saying that Russia's a great threat and Russia's the greatest evil today. Hey, Obama said it was over for 20 years. That was back in 2012. You just send money to Ukraine. We did what's right. Everyone puts their Ukraine flag out, and I have friends in Ukraine. I have friends in Russia too. I have friends in Ukraine that were, had to be evacuated. So my heart goes out to the people who are the victims of war. That really isn't what this is about. This is about political statecraft, because what responsibility is Ukraine and Russia to us? This country is not responsible for them. They have to get their own jobs. They have to make their own economy work, make their own constitution. They have to fight their own wars too. So we're only involved as part of statecraft to try and do this ongoing, long-standing manipulation of Putin, who is evil. Okay, Putin was, I think he was called the Prime Minister of Russia back in 1999, and then he officially became King Tsar, whatever ding-dong they have over there in like 2010 or whatever it is. But he didn't decide to go to war until Biden came in. That's when he saw the opportunity.
The only guy in town with a strategy is the President of the United States, and everybody needs to follow his lead.
What scares me is Zelensky, when he says it's going to go on for years, how many more lives are going to be lost? He's not going to have a country to save at the end of that. The minerals deal would have provided the monies to rebuild their country and a strong U.S. presence and maybe European troops as well.
And this is an important part of it. The president knows that, look, if you want real security guarantees, if you want to actually ensure that Vladimir Putin does not invade Ukraine again, the very best security guarantee is to give Americans economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. The security guarantee and also the economic guarantee for Ukraine is to rebuild the country and ensure that America has a long-term interest. You're not going to do that if you come to the Oval Office, insult the president, and refuse to follow his plan for peace.
And there's another brilliance to that mineral deal that I really love. It would allow us to do something with Ukraine without it being seen as belligerent against Russia. This is where the creativity of the Trump administration is brilliant. They are having us do something for Ukraine without dragging them into NATO, and without using bombs and missiles. The uncreative warmongers can only see things in terms of bombs and missiles. And Trump came up with a brilliant, or whoever came up with it, came up with a brilliant, peaceful solution that doesn't require us to be shooting Russians. We just open up a business in Ukraine. And suddenly Putin's going, well, I'm not going to fire on those. I really don't want to fight on U.S. I don't want to start that fight. So that's some brilliant statecraft. I love how J.D. Vance defended himself here, even though left-wing media is going after him. They despise him, including the rhinos and never Trump guys over at who I listen to at Commentary Magazine, John Podhoretz. They're like, J.D. Vance, that isolationist J.D. Vance.
I think Donald Trump is very unhappy with the way Zelensky conducted himself in the Oval Office. He is serious about getting both countries to the table. And you talk about pulling the rug out from underneath someone. Well, who pulled the rug out first? Zelensky was supposed to show up at the White House Friday for a perfunctory meeting and sign this deal, which would have bound the United States and Ukraine closer together. And he just couldn't bring himself to just sign the papers and head out. And so, look, I think Trump ran on ending the war. He said day one. We're not at day one right now, but he wants to end the war as soon as possible. He has managed to engage Putin in some kind of conversation. He thought he was engaging Zelensky. And then Zelensky goes out today and says, oh, we're very, very far away from ending the war. The exact wrong thing to do. I don't know who he's getting his political advice from, but he needs to stop listening. It sounds like maybe Chris Murphy and other Senate Democrats. If you want to understand how to deal with Donald Trump, those are the wrong clowns to consult with. Maybe for balloon animals at a child's birthday party, but not for geopolitical advice.
He's talking about Chris Murphy there. This is the accusation that the Democrats were kind of sabotaging this thing and leaning into Zelensky or into the Ukraine advisors to not take the minerals deal. This is the other thing. The Democrats, we already know, they don't want Trump to have a win about the Ukraine war. They want it to be a mess, a bigger mess than always. I don't know if they're willing to sabotage and increase a war over that. Wouldn't surprise me. Their thinking is also, we don't care about Ukraine or Russia or Europe. We care about our own political standing here. And all we know is whatever Trump does is bad. If Trump did the exact opposite and offered weapons to Ukraine at this last deal, Democrats would be criticizing it. So ignore the political class on this stuff. This is Alex Thompson at CNN. He is not a Trump fan at all. He helped Jake Tapper write his lie of a book, but he has an interesting discussion about Ukraine. So if there's any dissent against J.D. Vance and against the Trump position,
I feel.
But I can tell you that this Vance-Zelensky showdown has been brewing for months. That, Zelensky in the final weeks of the election last year called Vance too radical in his proposals. And, in some ways, Vance is actually even more anti-interventionist when it comes to this war than Trump himself is. And in the Senate, he was too. And his, sort of small team that he brought over from the Senate, they were among the most anti-Ukraine or, anti-interventionist part of the Senate offices, for the last 2 years.
I think it's two ways. I don't disagree with you that the items you laid out in terms of what this election is about, those were, I would put the economy and the border higher than the Ukraine and Russia war in terms of what people were saying. But I think the impact of how he is handling it wasn't really litigated in the election, because for so long we were asking President Trump, candidate Trump then, where do you stand on Russia? Where will you stand up to Putin? And he never, and people like me who said, I think he's going to side with Russia were said what I was saying. They were telling me that I wasn't being an honest broker on it. And now we see something like this. I also watch.
Hold on. So she's saying that Trump's not being an honest broker on it, implying that Trump is on Russia's side. Trump has not given one caveat or said a compliment, or said he's on the side of Russia at all. He's only said he wants peace. So I got to clarify that for you guys.
That meeting in the Oval Office and thought about it. He is the president of the United States. And as someone who has worked for a president and has sat in an Oval Office and briefed the president, you do not argue if you're on their team with it. But you do have a responsibility when you work for someone to brief them properly and give them every possible scenario. And I think that fact that Zelensky was not going to accept that J.D. Vance made a premise that he was not thankful and that Putin was being diplomatic. I don't think any world leader would let that actually stand.
So don't take the bait. Wouldn't that be the brief?
But didn't Trump take the bait?
Wouldn't that be the brief to President Zelensky? If you watch the 40 minutes of this, which is a long, grueling thing, it's absurd, right? For a press conference this long. But Zelensky was 10 minutes away from having a minerals deal and as close to as Zelensky could get from Trump security guarantees. 10 minutes away from guns, money, and the ability to go fight the fight so that you actually had a point of leverage. Instead, he took the bait from the vice president, and the vice president showed he has real capacity in this administration.
I think J.D. Vance should have been a bigger person and not played a game in the Oval Office with our ally.
I want to watch a little. We do have a little bit of J.D. Vance and Zelensky going back and forth, just to kind of bring everybody back into that moment, because it really is a remarkable one. Watch.
You should be thanking the president for trying to bring it into this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
And come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour.
He calls it a propaganda tour, Alex. One question I have here. I mean, there were reports that Joe Biden and Zelensky got into it a little bit at the end of the Biden administration. Is this just Zelensky as a person, and then it explodes? Is this J.D. Vance recognizing that Zelensky kind of has a tendency to, lose his temper, maybe, if that's what happened, and he's poking that for his own ends?
I think both things can be true. Joe Biden, the Biden administration, felt that sometimes that Zelensky was ungrateful for the amount of aid that and basically just felt that they were asking for more and more and didn't always have a clear plan. But I can also tell you that the Trump team, even some of the people that are more sympathetic to Ukraine, think Zelensky completely misplayed this hand and basically set it up where now they're basically saying, like, you better get on TV and apologize.
Better get on TV and apologize, and he's not going to apologize. If he does, that's the only way that he can get our help. Trump flat out laid it out. He goes, he can get on TV and he can apologize publicly for being rude to us, for dissing us. And so they're going to break Zelensky if he is ever going to get America's help again. And I'm all for that, because I think that guy, look, I don't like either Zelensky or Putin. And Putin is way worse. Putin is way worse. That does not mean Zelensky is my buddy or my ally. It doesn't mean I want to help him either, just because we have a mutual enemy. This is Chip Roy on CNN.
The president wants a ceasefire. He's been very clear about that. He campaigned on that. He talked about that. He wants peace. And so right now they're saying have a ceasefire. And the president was serious about saying we can sit down with Russia and try to figure out where the lines will be drawn, figure out Crimea, figure out Donbass. But at the end of the day, we've got to actually know what the path to success is. Ukrainians are dying by the tens of thousands. Our money is being used to fuel that war and continue a war that I'd like to know, where does that lead us?
No one's given a plan. That's a legit criticism of the pro-Ukraine war people, anti-Europe, anti-Zelensky, pro-Trump side, which Chip Roy is doing here. And of course, this Caitlin Collins this lady on CNN is not going to have an answer, because they've never put out a plan for how this is going to work. All Zelensky says is peace is very, very far away, and he's not even sure if he's going to ever get those 2 pieces of property back into his country that Putin invaded. So there's no plan. No one wants to stand up and say, we must defeat Putin. We must end Putin. We must end his regime. Or we must just push him back to those boundary lines. Or we must resecure a new boundary line around the old boundary lines because they've been compromised. No plan, no end game. So this is an endless war.
How do we get to success here?
Who do you blame for that war?
I mean, look, the war started under Joe Biden's watch. He destroyed our energy policies. He empowered Russia. He was siding with Iran and China, which was also helping Russia.
Wait, but you blame Joe Biden for the war?
This all started under Joe Biden.
But who started the war?
But my point is that war wouldn't have started if Donald Trump's in the White House. If we have a strong hand in the White House, Vladimir Putin does not go into Ukraine.
This is a very important point, because the Democrats, it's easy to go back and say who started the war. I like that. Who started the war? Of course it's Putin started the war, but that doesn't tell the story. Why was Putin in power in 2014 and he didn't start the war? All the way up through 2020 under Trump, he did not start the war. And then under Biden, he starts a war. Why? Hitler's in power all these years. He doesn't start World War II. And then suddenly Neville Chamberlain comes in and says, we'll have peace in our time. And then, because he's naive, and Hitler goes, yeah. And then he starts a war. Why? To me, it's not that evil people and countries exist. It's they always want to start a war. So who actually gives them the opportunity and encouragement to start it? Who's weak enough and naive enough? And in this case, Putin may have wanted Ukraine his whole life, but the reason why he did it when he did was because of Joe Biden's weakness. Elections have consequences. That's something that a Democrat like this lady on CNN does not want to admit.
It's the truth. We had a weak hand in the White House.
Well,
Joe Biden
that's
let it
not the
happen.
truth. That's your analysis and your view, but you don't know that for sure. And secondly,
all I know is there weren't a lot of wars getting started under President Trump.
Amen. That's the one. All we know is, so you can't say that Joe Biden's absolutely the cause. You can only say that all these years existed and Putin did not invade Ukraine. And then at this time, he did. Who was sitting in the White House? Joe Biden.
But my
In
point
his
of,
4 years, what war started under President Trump?
my point of the answer to that question was that Putin started this war and Russia started this war. Do you disagree with that?
Well, Putin obviously invaded Ukraine, but the reason that happened was because of weakness from the United States. Like our foreign policy matters. When we absolutely give away the field on energy, when we make bad decisions in terms of who we're siding with around the globe, and we strengthen the hand of Putin, then he walks into Ukraine, then we throw money at Zelensky and say, okay, here you can have all the resources you need to keep funding a war, which, but where was Europe in a lot of that? Yes, I know they contributed some, but we were funding the lion's share of that. And then you wonder, well, why is this getting perpetuated when Ukrainians are dying and now they can't even recruit enough people to fight the war?
But I'm not going to argue this point, but it is.
And we're going to cut her off because the clip ends. But we have to convince, Zelensky of a fact. The fact is Zelensky is not going to win this war. You have to get him to give up. I hate to say it. It's going to be difficult. In fact, you almost have to take it out of his hands because he's not capable of giving up. Now, I want to show you, this is a cool map. I'm not a Russia defender, so don't go there. But this is an animation showing year by year. Watch this. This is what Russia's afraid of. This is NATO allies coming in to the west side of Russia after NATO promised not to go east. So look at, we're adding all these people to NATO. They're becoming NATO partners and allies. That means if Russia attacks one country, then all the countries unite and attack Russia. This is all about Russia and perhaps by proxy, China and Iran, who are Russian allies. And Korea, probably, North Korea. But there we are. Russia's going, hey, I see what's going on here. There's Ukraine. So, and that puts it right on their border. Let me get right up to there just to show you locationally. Is Ukraine really the innocent party, or is not this a proxy war by NATO trying to manipulate them? And remember, this goes back to that. I've been covering the Ronald Reagan deal back when the Berlin Wall fell, and they agreed. They go, as long as you do not move 1 inch eastward from Germany. And now you look over here, here's Germany. And now you look over here at how far we've come. Look at Poland to the right, Chechnya below that, Romania down there below Ukraine, Turkey down at the bottom. And now there's Ukraine and Belarus well on their way. We did not do what we said we would do. We never intended it. And this is all just statecraft. And I think Americans care more. It was never a problem until 2021, right? Once Putin invades Ukraine, now suddenly our tax dollars are paying for this thing. We're sending weapons. We're doing a proxy war, using those weapons to fire on Russia, but pretending like we're not involved at all. Okay, we're sending all of the armaments, jets, fighters, blah, blah, and suddenly we're trying to say that we're out of the war. It's time to call it what it is. And now Americans are going, you know what horrifies me? My taxpayers spending billions of dollars when our kids can't read in school. And Russia and Ukraine war is way over there. We're more horrified at the thought of being involved in a war to two countries way over there than we are that Putin is a bad guy. And I'm right on that. I think Putin, if he leaves us alone, I'm not going to fight this proxy war. We've weakened America so much, it's time to take America back and take care of us first. And that's the MAGA agenda. I'm Doug in exile. What do you guys think in the comments below?